Review panel convened to review applications submitted for the Regional Initiative Grants for fiscal year 2020. I'm Louis Rickey, Executive Director of the Indiana Arts Commission. Today is April 30th, 2019, and we are at the Indiana Humanities Council building in Indianapolis. We welcome applicants who may be part of our audience today and would like to remind you that there is to be no direct contact or conversation about the evaluation and disposition of applications before, during, or after the panel meeting. Please be sure that all cell phones are silenced during the meeting today. At this time, we would like the panelists and staff to introduce themselves, stating their name, occupation, and where they are from in the state. We'll start with Emily.
I'm Emily Lysuson with the Indianapolis Arts Center in Indianapolis.
Sarah?
Hi, Sarah Hummersbach, Development Coordinator at Indy Reads. Live in Indianapolis, Indiana, but I grew up in Northwest Indiana.
Why don't we do all the panelists first? Jennifer?
My name is Jennifer Knopsey, and I'm the Collections Manager at the Children's Museum of Indianapolis, and I live in Indianapolis.
I'm Eric Olson. I'm the Institutional Giving Manager of the Indiana Repertory Theater, which is based in Indianapolis, and I live in Fishers.
And I'm Mary Norman from Bloomington, Indiana, and I'm a nonprofit administrator.
And I'm Stephanie Haynes, a Region 7's Grant Manager at the IAC.
Deanna Postma, the Grants and IT Manager at the IAC.
Now we'll begin the panel review, and this is how the process will work. I will announce the application. We will review and ask the first reader to begin the discussion. The first reader will provide their assessment of the application based upon the evaluation criteria and their perspective. Panelists, please note that the application does not need to be recapped since everyone has read it. Just provide your comments. After the first reader is finished, I will ask the second reader to present any new, additional, or opposing comments. We are not looking for consensus, just a full evaluation from the different perspectives panelists bring to the table. After the second reader has finished, I will open the discussion to the full panel to offer their perspectives. Remember, in the interest of time, we are only looking for new, additional, or opposing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, we will ask that panelist to leave during the application's evaluation. Finally, once the application has been reviewed by the full panel, we ask the panel to update their scores in the online system. It is common for scores to change as a result of this broader discussion. These scores save automatically. Are there any questions? All right, well, let's begin. We'll start with application number 1, Asante Children's Theater, and we'll start with the first reader, Eric Olson.
All right. I'm moving between computer and paper here, so please forgive me if I come off a little disjointed ever. I think the history, the purpose, the activities of Asante are very clearly explained. It's a very clear need that they've identified. It serves a wide range of underserved populations, and they're given access to the arts through a very culturally rich program, which I like. A thing that stuck out to me as being very strong about how they're organized is that they clearly address real-world skills. Building confidence, teaching conflict resolution, goal setting, public speaking, teamwork. These things are not always clearly marked out in an artistic program. It's nice to see that. Organizationally, they are clearly in a period of transition, I think, trying to move themselves up to the next level as far as what they can accomplish. They provide a strategic plan that I thought was very comprehensive, provides clear steps for moving forwards. I would love, one thing I was concerned about, I'd love it if someone else had a different take, if I'm misunderstanding it. It seemed, looking at the funding deficit that showed up in fiscal year 18 on the budget was actually budgeted in to be a loss that year. I was a little puzzled by that. Under community engagement, they clearly lay out the benefits of the programming for a diverse community with a very specific desire to increase their service in Pike Township. I think it was very specific. It would help in general community engagement, I thought, to know a little bit more detail regarding the two-way planning between the organization and the communities that they are trying to reach. They state that they identify key people from organizations to meet, but there are very few specifics as to what actually happens in that engagement, how they're working together. I would just like a little bit more detail there. A good example on that front, I thought, was talking about how they work with parents to coordinate transportation barriers. Clear problem, solution, right there. A little more information along those lines might be helpful. Looking at arts education, this is clearly an area of great strength for them, central focus of their work. There was one statement they made that particularly stood out to me. We do not rely on participants or parents to innately understand how this skill development translates to their day-to-day lives, so we build those connections for them. Paraphrasing that, but identifying this is what we do, we don't count on you to know that without help, let us guide you there, is a very nice approach for me. I would like to see the qualifications of the educators laid out in a little bit greater detail, just so we know who it is that's providing this programming in the arts education area. Let me see if I can get something here. I think that about sums up.
All right, we'll go on to the second reader, who's Emily.
I agree with a lot of what Eric said. I thought it was a very strong application overall. Really appreciated their detailed explanation of programs, need, having some data behind it. There was a sentence about how they provide, near the beginning, they're wanting to highlight arts education where highlighting African and African American contributions to history are a priority. So I read that as a need for not only arts education among the population they're serving, but that specific aspect of arts education. And I thought there was a very good case for why that is a need and how they meet that need. I really liked the lifelong learning and the sequential and strong arts education. I liked that they were trying to transition as an organization and build more capacity. I thought that was important to where they are in their life cycle as an organization. So that question on the budget of why there was a budgeted loss, I noticed a sentence that said there was a need to spend a prior fund balance to accomplish goals, and I thought that was why there might have been a budgeted loss, but I wasn't totally clear on what that meant or what that really did. So I also had some questions there. Let's see. And in general, in the financial explanation section, I agreed and liked the overall plan that was laid out, but just wanted to see a little bit more specifics in how it related to the budget itself. Yeah, I thought that the community engagement plan is strong. I agreed I had a little bit of question in the argument that was made, but it seems like community engagement is so central to the mission of the organization that it's reflected all throughout the organization. And yeah, I thought the arts education and artistic quality were consistent.
All right, well, we will open it up for any further comments or discussion from the rest of the panel. Hearing none, I will ask you to finalize your scores and update any comments online. And just show me with your body language that you're done, and we'll move on. I like the folded hand. times, that's good. Okay, we'll go to number 2, Claude McNeal's musical theater training program. Mary, you are our first reader.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
No problem.
Take your time.
Um, in the first section for the organizational excellence, that there was a very articulate description of their programs. They had a diverse program, many diverse programs targeting inner city and rural students. I was not able to open up their Excel spreadsheet, so I can't comment completely. I'm gonna try to open it up now. They're on their financials. I thought this was a very well written application. The community engagement, I felt how they targeted social emotional learning and understanding and managing emotion for their participants, achieving positive goals and expressing empathy, developing positive relationships, making better decisions. I thought this is something we could all benefit for, and they had enough diverse programs that really not only just worked on the craft, but worked on the individual themselves for their future. And I think that's all I want to say at this time.
All right, and our second reader is Jennifer.
I think one of the strengths in this application was the Youth Advisory Board. I think this is a very smart way to keep their programming relevant and also to receive constructive feedback from the community, especially since the ACT OUT program targets current social issues. One of the areas that could have been maybe written about more was I'd like to see more information about accessibility. It is laudable that they perform in venues that are ADA accessible and that they offer ASL performances upon request, but I'd like to see a bit more information about their efforts in that arena.
I'm going to open it up to the rest of the panel. Mary, you can certainly chime in at that
Okay. I
juncture
did make
too.
a comment that on their YouTube video that it was effective on how they worked with individuals in groups and really targeting like bullying, which is such a huge topic today, and addressing it in their program and trying to turn that bullying into a positive and effective way. So I thought that their artistic material was great.
The only thing I had concerns about under artistic quality was the promotional materials and social media marketing. Some of those materials seemed a bit dated and not clear enough to me as someone that's trying, for an organization trying to connect with young people. Some effort there, or maybe some different examples would have strengthened this for me, just in that one area. But otherwise, overall, I agree with everyone else's comments.
I think I had a similar comment, but I did note that they are aware of that
Yeah.
issue and are trying to address that.
Mhm.
I'm always respectful of the organization.
Yeah.
confronts, his challenges and is ready to face them.
Mhm.
I did just have one thought on the financials that it just caught my eye. In each of the fiscal years presented, there's a significant gap between what is budgeted for contracted services income and then what the actual or projected income is there. I would like to see a little more detail to just explain that gap, but it seems to be a consistent thing that's appearing year over year. So to find out what is making that separation there, or if there's another way that they might want to reevaluate bringing those two numbers into a bit more close alignment.
Any other comments? Well, hearing none, I'll ask you to update your scores and comments and let me know when you're ready to move on. All right. We will move on to the Gregory Hancock Dance Theater. And Sarah, you are our first reader.
All right. Overall, I thought this was a solid and clear application. There were some areas where I think some more detailed explanations would have strengthened the overall applicant. Specifically in the first section for organizational excellence, I would have liked to have seen a more detailed explanation about the increase in budget needs for the La Casa Azul performance. It was talked about, just a bit more detail would have to explain exactly why this much increase was needed. I would have found helpful. And again, under community engagement, the plans detailed to engage with high school age students. I would like to see a bit more detail about the plan and, as we've talked about, that two-way give and take, how specifically they're getting feedback from that age group to target them more directly. And I would like to see more concrete, under arts education, more concrete descriptions about the outcomes of the programming they provide. So what is the impact of experience the theater and other cultures beyond the specific activities listed in the application? I think explaining what audiences that are in attendance on top of people that are participating directly in their performances, what some of the educational outcomes are for those people would be really helpful for me. I think it would support their request overall a bit more. And I thought overall artistic quality was great.
So I'll open it up to the panel for additional comments. Hearing none, I will ask you to update your scores and your comments. Let me know when you're ready to move on.
I'll correct what I said pre-panel. Gregory Hancock Dance Theater is also in AOS too. Didn't mention that before, but they are.
Is everyone ready? All right, Indiana Artisan. Jennifer, you are our first reader.
Okay. One major strength in this application was their board composition. They identified that they had a problem in the past of communicating with artists and artisans, and so their board makeup now includes 4 artists. And I think this really demonstrates how they strengthen their relationship with their audience and become stronger for that. They also demonstrate how being a members of organization allows them to receive input and new ideas from their artists and volunteers and their community. For example, during their marketplace, volunteers are a great source of feedback for them. They did identify millennials as one of their target communities, and they have created a next generation collectors program to garner art appreciation and monetary support. And I believe that they demonstrate that they wisely use social media, specifically Facebook, to communicate with their community and to also get new programmatic ideas. I would like to have seen some more information about accessibility, diversity, and inclusion efforts. And I really thought it was wonderful that they mentioned support of rural artisans, but I would like to have read more about how these programs work and how the larger communities benefit from them.
All right, we'll move on to Eric as the second reader.
Yes, I also was very impressed with the efforts to reach out to rural underrepresented areas of the state, to really reach into those areas and find a variety of crafts that they bring in here. I very much appreciated all of the different art forms that they engaged. The one wish I had had on that was within those art forms, I too would like to see a little bit more information about diversity. Are we reaching out to see art forms specifically from Native American, African American, Latinx, so that it's just not type of media that's being sampled, but also from a wide variety of backgrounds. That may exist, but it wasn't clear to me in the application, I'm not sure. Overall though, I really like what it is they're trying to do with bringing focus into Indiana artisans and allowing them to practice their craft within the state, because that is always a challenge.
I'll open it up to the greater panel now.
Anyone maybe correct me if I'm mistaken on this, but I didn't see a balance sheet attached. I saw an income and expense statement, but not the balance sheet. Part of the reason I was wondering is because the retail locations appear to have significant costs or inflate the budget. And I can certainly understand the appeal of those, but I wanted a little bit more detail. Did anyone understand that differently than me? And then I had some questions on community engagement. I really appreciated that they brought out the need for younger shoppers, and that made sense to me that that is a large and growing need in their audience. I might steer clear from calling millennials underserved, just because I wanted to see some more specificity in that. Although I appreciate the point that maybe the millennial generation receives less arts education. One way potentially to reach more audiences or more millennials, more of the audience they want to reach, would be through partners and collaborators. I think there are other arts organizations that work in this space around artisans. So I would like to see more about collaborations.
Anyone else?
I like the fact that if an artisan cannot qualify for entrance in some of their outlets, that they get mentored by accomplished artists, so as not to discourage them and leave their craft, but rather to continue to improve and grow. So I like that mentorship. This is huge. What they do is they do a lot. It was hard to keep it all straight, but it all had to go reaching so many artisans and giving them support. I really enjoyed this application.
Any other comments? Hearing none, would you update your scores and comments and we'll move on? All right. We will begin the next application, Indianapolis Men's Chorus. Emily, you're our first reader.
I thought it was a very strong application overall. I liked their inclusivity. I thought that the community engagement section was strong. And in their organizational excellence section, I like that there's support from some significant donors and that was going into reserves. I thought it might have been nice to see a little bit more detail on the budget. That the arts education and artistic quality sections were also strong. I really liked the way they spoke about building bridges between LGBTQ people and others to promote tolerance and understanding. I liked the collaborations there around their concerts. Yeah, I thought it was a strong application.
Sarah, your second reader.
I too thought this was a really strong application. I really appreciated the transparency about efforts to connect with more people of color and other underserved populations as part of their LGBTQ efforts. And I thought those were well laid out. Again, community engagement also great. The under the organizational excellence section, the one comment I would have liked to see, and this might be happening and it just wasn't laid out in the application, but efforts to potentially have less of the working staff also on the board. That overlap can be a bit complicated. So if there are efforts to have more non-staff on the board and that's happening, I would have liked to have seen something like that. If it isn't happening, that's something to think about in the future. Let's see. And under educational section, overall really strong section, additional information about the educational outcomes for audiences attending their programming, I think again would strengthen the application overall. So the people that are engaged with them, what are they leaving learning? And artistic quality, again, strong overall.
I will open it up to the rest of the panel.
I thought it was kind of generous in 2017 and 2018 that a donor gave them $71,000, which really helped them to move their program forward. I also found it positive that they started off as a gay men's choir, and now they have straight, transgendered, and bisexual men that are the singers, and even included that in their media material, that there were various backgrounds and age groups.
Any other comments? Go ahead and update your scores and your comments. All right, we will move on to Indy Baroque, and Mary, you are our reader.
In their organizational excellence, I noticed that in 2017, they claimed it was a difficult year, and they mentioned challenges that they faced. And then in the P&L statement, they restricted us from knowledge of that year, but they provided income, cash income in the year 2016 and 2017 without reporting that gap in 2017. So I was, that transparency I thought was somewhat clouded. Since they are asking for money, and it is recent. That was really about my only comment for the book.
I'll open it up to the rest of the panel.
Well, I thought they had really strong community engagement. They mentioned their use of social media, like with early music month in March, and then also asking audience to like select music that they'd like to hear, part of the mixtape. So I thought that was really a smart move on their part to use social media to engage with their community. And I think they have a very well-credentialed leadership.
For, excuse me, for a group that is performance-based and doesn't offer, say, a specific training and education program, I actually very much liked the way that they've woven historical context and developmental information into their performances about the instruments, the music, how it's developed. To me, that, as an audience member, that would make for fascinating programming to get that educational aspect of it included. On the organizational front, one thing I was just curious about is the budget for fiscal year 19 shows a very ambitious increase from the previous year, almost doubling its contributed income, but a clear roadmap for attaining that goal was not laid out for me, and I would just like to have more information as to what their projected pathway is to achieve that goal.
Any other comments? Would you update your scores and comments? The next application is from Kids Dance Outreach. Eric, you are our first reader.
I would like to preface this by saying I am not a dancer. I, in fact, actively seek to avoid dance in my daily life. And that being said, I was hugely impressed by this application. I thought the history purpose of the organization is very clearly stated. Programmatic activities are very in line with that vision. Accessibility is outstanding, particularly the placement of their programming within a school day. Your audience is there, built in. You're reaching out to them. The fact that all of the programming is free to the students involved was fantastic. Community engagement is at the heart of what they do. The service to children and families is diverse in its ethnic background, socioeconomic background, the people it reaches. I maybe would have liked to seen a clearer path towards the serving of younger children. They discussed that desire, maybe seeing how that would happen, but I have no doubt that they'll get there. Arts education is at the heart of what they do. That's got a student body that's diverse, inclusive. There's close interaction with school administrators, educational offerings that go throughout the year. Clear goals and outcomes are in the arts programming, the educational programming. In fact, a lot of the programming and the outcomes struck me as being very similar to outcomes that are often promoted for sports programs. And yet this reaches to a group of kids who may not be comfortable in those programs. So I would love to see a program like this get the sort of acclaim and widespread support that an athletic program often has. Finally, with the artistic quality, the video that was provided actually made me cry. To see such a diverse group of children actively engaged in the programming, working together, I thought it was inspiring. I thought the commitment of the staff was readily apparent in those materials. I think this was a really strong application.
Emily.
I agree. I felt that you almost couldn't help but like this application. It was so inclusive. I really liked that they found a way to offer programs during the school hours. It definitely got a sense that the instruction is high in quality. One thing that I really enjoyed in their sequential programming was that their scholarship program gave an avenue for students to continue to pursue dance. Loved the Dancers with Disabilities program, and if space allowed, I would have been curious to learn more about that. Yeah, thank you.
Any additional comments from the panel?
I also agree that I thought this was a really, really strong application. I like the fact that they had a 10-question pre and post survey that was completed by the teacher for each child. And the survey was not academic based, but a rating based on the individual and his own personal achievements, which according to this application, they work on their self-worth, academic achievement, social skills, and a better quality of life. I think a program we all could take. And I was also impressed with their strategic plan, and their board members had a parent, the principal, an attorney, and a social worker. So really, people that would have like information regarding the child itself, rather than they were kind of geared right, so they were focusing more on the child and the program for that child. I thought it was a very strong application.
Any other comments?
I too thought it was a really great application. The one thing that I really appreciated specifically in their arts education section was talking about the vitality of the skills beyond just learning dance moves, talking about the critical thinking, collaboration, the habits of healthy living, the global perspective, cultural literacy, being able to communicate through an art form, all of those aspects that people gained from this program I thought was really, really well put, and I appreciated that effort to explain.
If you would update your scores and comments. We're now halfway through. Is anyone in need or would like a few minutes for a break? Panel?
Only been 40 minutes, but.
But you're welcome to one if you'd like. All right, we will move on. The next one up is Pattern Incorporated. Mary, you are the first reader.
Initially, I was a bit confused as to exactly what Pattern did. Their narrative is, in my opinion, it was vague and the formatting was off. I noticed quite a bit of difference in their cash operating income from 2016 to 2017, and then 2017 to 2018. There wasn't much clarification on these differences, and their spreadsheet was uploaded in such a way that it was difficult to maneuver through it. There was a section in the community engagement regarding their FY20 community engagement. That section was left out. I was taken back in their arts education section when, and I have to go back and read the exact word, but I wrote to clarify the meaning of which side of the track. It really bothered me how they were saying the program was open no matter which side of the tracks. I thought that was a little possibly politically incorrect. And so I thought their artistic quality was colorful and enthusiastic. And it seemed that there was something for everyone. Their artistic quality I thought was very well presented.
Jennifer.
I believe that the Street Expo program that they mentioned is really impressive. I think it's wonderful how they identified streetwear artists as being an underserved community and that they provided free or low-cost support to them. And they do have a strong internship program, which demonstrates that they are serious in their efforts to serve the creative class and how they want to keep creative people here in Indiana. The community engagement planning section was a bit vague, I agree with Mary, and it would be helpful to know how the organization is actively planning events with their community in mind and indeed how they are going to involve them in the process.
I will open it up for other comments.
Just to say, I very much agree with the points raised by both readers. I thought the artistic quality of the materials presented are very strong. One of the links didn't work for me. I don't know if anyone else connected with it, the third link provided there. I would like to have seen what that offered. But as Mary said, there are just some areas I would have appreciated a little bit more clarity. I had commented almost exactly what she had said, that it took me a little time to figure out exactly what the group did beyond the magazine. That became more clear when specific examples of events and programs were listed, but kind of had to search that out. And again, yeah, that first question on the community engagement section, there was no answer for it, so I wasn't really sure how to address that.
I too had trouble with the budget form that they provided, and I don't know if it was just there was too much and I didn't see it or couldn't find it, but I couldn't find in there, and I'm looking at it again now to see if I missed it, but I couldn't see anything about their fiscal year 2019 budget or projections. I thought that was completely missing, but yet we had a 26-page document with like superfluous detail, in my opinion, yet information requested was somehow left out. unless I just missed it in there, but I couldn't find it, and I don't seem to be able to find it yet again now. An explanation as to why there was such a stark increase in the budget listed for this year was not explained well. I would have appreciated understanding why from 18 to 19 there's an additional $100,000 in their budget, but then did not see the actual budget sheet for it. Similar things about their community engagement section. And for the most part, I had trouble with the formatting and the lack of attention to detail, it appeared, because again, in the artistic quality, the things provided were like very bright, great attention to detail. I would have liked to have seen that attention to detail reflected in this application, because it was hard to get through.
I had a very similar comment on the budget. I also would encourage, with the additional notes that were in this budget, there were actually some donor names, which could be a violation of donor privacy. So I would encourage a more simplified budget in the future that addresses the 2-year comparison. I really thought the mission was unique and the programs, the artistic end, were exciting. So as the organization wants to grow and invest in paid staff, I would encourage also investing in administrative fundraising staff that might be able to address some of these concerns in addition to the creative concerns.
I'll ask you to update your scores. Any comments? We move on to Shelby County players. And Sarah, you are our first reader.
Overall, I thought this was a strong application. I didn't have too many comments. I thought their community engagement section was strong. Their plans to engage with student audiences seemed very clear and reasonably achievable to me. I liked in their arts education section how they articulated the benefits of theater work for students and audiences beyond technical skills and entertainment. I thought that was really helpful. Artistic quality, again, I thought was well done. If this is happening or if the organization isn't aware, I think the web and social presence that was provided could use some updating, specifically since they noted wanting to target more youth audiences. Maybe some areas in their organizational application laying out, or in their community engagement, if there are some other social media tactics that they're utilizing to tailor their messaging to that group, I think would have strengthened this application overall for me. But other than that, I thought it was really strong. I really appreciated what they provided.
Emily?
I agree. I didn't have a large number of notes, but definitely thought it was a strong application. Appreciated the clarity and the organizational structure, and it's an all volunteer organization, but it appeared to me to be a solid distribution of labor so that it's not all falling on a small number of people. there were points where I would have liked to see maybe a little bit more detail about the qualifications of personnel, particularly in the arts education section, but that was a pretty small note. I thought that section was strong. And I liked the target audience section, or the community engagement section and the target audiences. I thought that possibly under the community engagement question around inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, there'd be an opportunity to explain a little more about the demographics of the area. It's an area that I personally just don't know that much about. So would have liked to learn more about what the access is like to the arts overall, and if it's fairly equitable distribution of access, or if there are some demographics that might be more challenged than others. But I also thought that was a strong section. Good application.
Open it up to the group.
There were some things in the community engagement that really stood out to me, particularly for volunteer community theater. The fact that they are delving into sensory-friendly performances impressed me a lot for a community theater. Even more so that they are reaching out to community organizations that focus on audiences that would need this service. I found that very impressive, and that kind of community outreach extends to some of the events they do, their connections with the Strand Movie Theater, the library, Three Sisters. One thing that was a question, not a criticism at all, but I was just curious about, and I didn't notice an example, was they point out their 3 performances specifically for 2nd grade classes. I was just curious as to how 2nd grade was the thing that we landed on there, and why specifically the focus was there. But in their youth outreach also, I really like that a lot of their youth activities are guided by the children themselves too, so that they're learning by doing. I admire that.
They were the first organization I picked up on that they reached out to the hearing impaired. A lot of theater groups and so forth just kind of skip over. So I was really impressed with that. And that they have children with autism that are some of their volunteers in their organization. And being kind of a stickler for detail on their spreadsheet, if you're going to present numbers referring to money, then they should be in all categories in the same the way they're presented. Because in their first column, I remember they had the dollar signs and the decimals, and then everything else just went without decimals. They were just numbers. So that kind of threw me off. And so, yeah, that was just kind of a stickler that I picked up on.
Any other comments? Hearing none, I ask you to update your scores and comments. We'll now move on to Storytelling Arts of Indiana. Jennifer, you are our first reader.
From the application, I believe it's clear that diversity is a very strong aspect of their work. In their mission statement, they mention creating opportunities for diverse audiences of all ages. And this really comes through in the application through their programs that reach children in hospitals, to Marion County youth during summer camps, and to the Life Stories project that captures oral histories. They demonstrate that they collaborate with a variety of partners in the community, and they have a strong board recruitment process and representation on the board that includes persons with wide ranges of expertise. And they appear to have a very robust volunteer program, and they immediately follow up with those who seek interest in the organization. One of the areas that I would have liked to have seen more information about is the community engagement when they plan to seek empty nesters as sort of an underserved community. They don't explain in detail how they will actively identify and recruit this group, and it would also be helpful to know what the expected impact is of that outreach effort.
All right, very good. We'll go on now to Eric as the second leader.
I struggled a bit with this application. I know it seems ironic considering the organization in question, but I wish the story had been told better, more compellingly. I see such tremendous value in the organization and what they do. I wish that were laid out in greater detail here. I kept finding myself throughout the whole thing thinking of the history of oral tradition that goes back thousands of years, and the learning and the community building and everything that's a part of that, and I wanted that story to be presented here. And I saw it in the artistic representation, which I thought was very strong. Seeing these diverse stories, formats, connecting with their audience, I was like, yeah, that is exactly what storytelling is, shown beautifully there. But talking about that from the educational standpoint, from a community standpoint, I really would have liked a lot more detail in how the organization approaches that, how it comes about. That said, in community engagement, the As I Recall program for seniors I thought was wonderful. I love the bedside reading for children in the hospital. Fantastic outreach to segments of our population that are well served by it. A great deal of thought and effort is clearly spent building up a volunteer base, and in their surveys that go out, less clear to me on those surveys is if they allow the audience to offer their thoughts on the programming, how they would like to be served, what impact it has in the community. That again may be present, but it wasn't clear to me in the application. And it's just something I'd like to see moving forward as the group is talking about itself. There's a lot to discuss and be lauded for this program. Don't be afraid to dive into that and really examine what their place is in the community.
Other comments?
I too had some questions in the community engagement section. I thought the programming, their current program that they talked about was strong and explained very well. I struggled with their engagement strategies and their targeted population of empty nesters. I wanted to see more about why that was the targeted audience, and if there were efforts to somehow connect with that group, and what are the benefits of connecting with this group specifically. Additionally, some of the strategies just did not seem to fit, or again, with how they're receiving input, I think they could have provided more information about how that potentially could be impacting their programming, and if it is, and if they're using that to connect with more diverse audiences. That was also something that I noted in their artistic quality section, was that I thought the overall quality was really great, but I would have liked to have seen more of that diversity of age and ethnicity overall, and perhaps that's what they're trying to achieve, but that was not laid out well for me to understand in this application.
And I thought, as well, in the community engagement, my notes referenced that they really spent a lot of time discussing how they were going to get volunteers into their organization, and not really the demographics of the people who they want to participate in attending and performing in this organization. So that might have been misunderstood by the writer. The other part I thought was kind of funny was, this is a storytelling group, of course. So in their narrative in the beginning, in their organizational excellence, I stated it was quite wordy and it was a lot to decipher. You know, it seems they have a lot to do and offer. I think that if they cleaned it up and tightened up what actually they did do, it would have been easier than to maneuver through the rest of the application. I just felt it was wordy.
I want to piggyback too on this, the empty nesters discussion and the community engagement section. To me, it jumped from empty nesters to volunteers, and then, which made me wonder if they were trying to say that a lot of volunteers are empty nesters, in which case it would have made sense, because there is a lot of engagement with volunteers, and I think that's a big part of this question. I just wanted to see that spelled out a little bit more.
Other comments? Hearing none, I'll ask you to update your scores. We move on to the bigger picture film group. Emily, you are our first reader.
So I thought it was a very strong application. Really liked the artistic documentation and the explanation of the artistic documentation. I thought it was notable that their primary audience really was the filmmakers, making the concert or theater goers, film watchers, I suppose. Maybe a secondary audience, not a negative. I just thought it was an interesting way to structure this, so it was different from many of the other ones we read. One thing under organizational excellence, I did note that there are 4 board meetings a year, which seemed small only because it's so volunteer run. And again, that's not necessarily a negative, but it did make me curious how everything is happening. So, you know, maybe there are very active committees or other structures. So that might be something to explain a little bit more. I noted that 20% of the board are making financial contributions annually. I think that was alluded to in that, you know, it's a board that's under transition, and a lot of them are also volunteering and doing other things. So that is a lower number than we generally see, and so I would have just liked to see that explained. If there's a reason for that, or if that's an area they want to grow, why or why not. Let's see. I liked that they were expanding efforts to engage with target communities during program planning. So that was a good formative use of evaluation and community feedback. And I really liked the scholarship funds that are available. I wondered about barriers to entry beyond the cost of entry fees. So I don't know much about filmmaking, but I imagine that there's a lot of access to equipment and other things, and are there kind of conversations about those barriers to entry? I would have liked to learn a little bit more about that. I thought the arts education programs were great. The impacts were explained well, and there's no doubt that the artistic quality, branding, and marketing to me were very strong.
Mary, second reader on this.
I pretty much agree. The one thing I kind of picked up on their financials is they budgeted for donation and contributions in 2018 for $2,000, and they only were able to achieve $508 of that. And then they turned around and budgeted for 2019 at $3,000. So, that's a big gap. So I don't know if they're not reaching out for donations, or they're not working that avenue. So I was kind of looking at that. And they also changed their festival from July to May. And if I remember reading, they really acquired a lot of income having that festival in May, or in July, which probably gave access to more people, maybe on vacation or not in school or whatever. And I believe their income was as strong in May. So I was just wondering why the switch from July to May. Did anybody else pick up on that?
Tying in with that, I had that the growth between fiscal year 18 actuals and 19 projections seemed ambitious, given the fallout that resulted from that change there. We wondered if it might be prudent to have a year transition to allow it to adjust to the new things, or maybe there's secured funding to make these projections with confidence that just wasn't apparent in the materials that was given to us here, but I would have liked some more information on that as well.
Other comments?
One thing I wanted to note in the community engagement section, I appreciated them talking about when looking for locations to screen their films, they make an effort to make sure that it is like ADA accessible. But I would have liked to know more about if there are efforts being made for other access barriers when picking screening locations. So are they finding locations that are accessible via public transportation? Are they in different locations around the city, or is that specific location, because it meets the ADA requirements that they're looking for, is that solely the only place that they plan on having more screenings in the future? If there are other organizations that they could be collaborating with for input on some of their programming changes, I would have liked to have seen more about that as well, as they're trying to reach more broad audiences. How are they programming their films in a way that is meeting those needs? So mostly access and collaborations were parts of their community engagement plan that I would have liked to have seen laid out a bit more specifically.
I just have one more note on the financial. I have, in my years, I've seen a lot of P&L statements, and every single one of these, I mean, I felt like I needed another education. The categories, the shifting, balancing, not balancing. And this one, I didn't mention when I first read. It was the first time where I saw there was a negative in retained earnings. So, does that mean somebody's borrowing against the earnings? I mean, so I felt like I needed a CPA on some of these. But this was the first one I thought, and I was like, okay, what is negative? What is retained earnings negative? So if you look at their balance sheet from February 28, 2019, in the second section, liabilities and equity, that was, I think, the only one that I saw in P&L that had a negative in earnings. So that might have been from when they were switching, but I don't know if somebody can explain. I don't want to go back to school.
Other thoughts? Would you please update your scores and comments?
Does no one need a break? It's been an hour. You feeling okay? Got a couple more in you?
In the home stretch.
Yeah, we're almost done.
All right, let's go on to the children's ballet. And Sarah, you are the reader.
All right. This was another application that I thought overall was strong and laid out the information clearly for me to understand. I would have appreciated probably in the first section, the organizational excellence, the financial information. Their spreadsheet was could have been a bit clearer. The narrative, I'm just trying to pull it up here. Where did it go? And I don't know if anyone can answer this for me, but in their 17-18 budget year, there's nothing listed in accounts receivable. I don't know if what happened there, but I don't think it wasn't explained in the narrative to me, and I don't know if I'm just missing something. Again, some of these I felt like I too needed a CPA and was just like, wait, what is happening? I thought in their community engagement section though, they had a really clear discussion on the different elements and their plans to increase their engagement opportunities. I really appreciated some of those efforts and trying to not just reach the community that they are in specifically, but the surrounding communities that they could potentially be serving. I would, in their arts education section, again, a really strong section, I would have liked further detail on the types of individuals that are benefiting from their program beyond their age group, and like a curiosity for dance, what beyond those elements are beneficial about their arts education program. I just would have liked a bit more information in that area. So, and yeah, for their artistic quality, I thought it was really nice. Would have liked a bit more classroom or training footage in it, just to see more of what's really going on at the children's ballet. Their performance was beautiful, and I just would have liked to see a bit more of the process in their artistic documentation.
And I'll open it up for comments.
I found myself just wanting a bit more information on the diversity front. Looking at the board of directors, for instance, they did a very good job of representing the geographic area. Age range is well described. I would just like to know more about any ethnic diversity, particularly because warranted or not, it's an art form that has stereotypically a very narrow focus, you know, that people think of it. So to see that they're actively combating that would be nice to see. And in the community engagement, again, I just wanted a little bit more information. They use statements like, we are currently working with current homeschool families. Each season ends with a survey. I'd like to know what's in that survey. Are you doing more than asking for leads for participation? Just more information in general. But that being said, in community engagement, the efforts to include homeschool families and students with financial challenges, I thought were excellent. I'm very happy to see that.
I had some similar questions. One thing that felt a little bit like an elephant in the room to me in reading this was, why did the organization transition to become a nonprofit? And that's fine, transitioning from a for-profit to nonprofit, but I would have liked to see it explain why and what changed. Did they add programs? You know, what was the reasoning? Are there additional needs they're trying to serve as a nonprofit? One thing that's linked to that might seem like a fine point is, in looking at the website, I noticed there's a .com domain name. If I were a donor, I would struggle to give a donation to a .com website. It introduces some questions that don't necessarily need to be there, but I would have liked to see an explanation. And then the board as well had a more of a for-profit-like structure than what I typically see in nonprofits, where the chair and vice chair are also the two individuals who are in charge of the staff. So, you know, that to me raised the question of what sorts of external voices is the board bringing in? What's the community representation? Are there those checks and balances that you look for from a board? I did, really enjoy that the mission statement talked about high quality dance instruction and the impact on kids of self-discipline, dedication, positive self-esteem. But a little bit like what's been said, I would have liked to see some of those other impacts described in the outcomes. So positive self-esteem, dance is an area that can be difficult, can kind of privilege a certain body type, and what's being done to make all children feel good about themselves. And again, I know that it may be being done. I just would have liked to see it described in a little bit more detail.
I don't know much about Hendricks County. I don't know the demographics, but they said their targeted underserved community were the rural and the homeschooled. But I did not see any reference to urban, low income, or ethnic diversity. And again, that might be based on Hendricks County, because also in their media material, I didn't see any of that represented in any of that. And in the arts world, ballet is kind of a highbrow. So it would have been nice to have mentioned if there is that possibility to outreach to urban, to low income and ethnic diversity, even in the different sizes and ages of groups of children. So that was the thing that struck me on this application.
Other comments? You'd update your schools. All right, before we move on to number 13 here, we're going to ask Eric to go get a granola bar or something. As he has a conflict of interest. And so we have one reader for this, and that's Jennifer.
Okay.
I think from this application that, well, first of all, they have a very strong and clear mission statement that I believe that they demonstrate that they really care about developing and nurturing writers. They note that they have an impressive increase of having 14 days of programming in 2017 to over 100 days of programming in 2019. They also are very transparent in admitting that they're seeking to diversify their board composition. And I really like their social media. Their YouTube Artist Spotlight was very informative and inspiring, and I thought it truly captured the artistic merit and positive impact that this organization has on the arts. I will say that the link that they provide, I don't know if anybody else had this, it didn't work, but I went ahead and just went to their YouTube channel and I just chose a random one to look at, but I liked it. So some areas for development, they mentioned that they're reaching out to 3 specific underserved communities, and they identified the LGBTQ community, artists of color, and artists with children. They do go into some specifics about how they're reaching out to the LGBTQ community, but they really didn't offer any examples of how they're going to assist artists of color or artists with children. And accessibility efforts really, I didn't see, at least, were addressed in the application.
Other comments?
I did notice that they were trying to diversify their board members by attaining board members from New York and LA, and it's like, New Harmony, it's not that big. It's like there, and if you miss the term, you miss it. Great community. So I was really kind of surprised that they would reach out so far, and yet they say they have 100% board support, and 17 members on the board. Be interesting to find out the percentages of attendees at these board meetings if you're coming from New York. Where do you fly to Evansville? Oh. So that was kind of, I think, I personally thought the narrative portion was very, very wordy, and I didn't feel a fluid flow from the idea and the thoughts. No paragraphs. And there was a lot of words that just seemed like way too much. I just felt like I kept going, like, okay, when can I take a breath? And they have a high school outreach program for one day. And like I said, New Harmony is way down there. And they want to outreach to many high schools. Well, how far can you go to travel in one day for a high school student unless they arrange for a bus or, there's a lot of logistics involved in a one-way and a one-day outreach program. So, they claim they didn't have any expenditures in 2018, and then I have to reread this. Then it said something that it went to 70,000, or they're budgeting to 70,000. It says claims no expenditures in 2018 to over 70,000. I don't know. Let's skip that thought. But anyway, so those were basically on my feedback on this. That sounds like a great program, but I think it's like this. It's out there.
I agree. That they're yeah, great job. I just skipped right into the rest of us talking, but it's fine. But specifically in the community engagement section, I too thought just more clarity. This is sort of a small thing, and they talk about it eventually in this section, but I think earlier on, answering that first question, briefly stating those main communities at the very beginning that they're wanting to target specifically, I think would help strengthen that argument. They started off by talking about writers who are in need of support, and then later on they talk about the demographic groups they want to. I would have liked to just have seen that earlier so I knew immediately who we were working towards. So some of that was a bit vague, like that specific phrase, writers who are in need of support, I think could have been clarified for me. Like, does that mean general underserved communities, people, writers living in low income communities, writers that just need growth opportunities, both? What are those voices that they're trying to seek? That could have been fleshed out a bit more for me. I thought their educational programming options were really nice. I would have appreciated some more explanation on the benefits and outcomes of those programs for the underserved populations they're choosing to get. I too, for some reason, could not get their YouTube link to work, and I typed in the exact one. It just said it wasn't available. So I based their artistic quality section solely on their promotional materials that they provided. I thought they had high artistic quality, but there were some small attention to detail things that I think could be improved. All of their social profiles still had their 2018 Giving Tuesday graphic as the profile photo, and it's April 2019. Just little things could be updated to show that there's that attention to detail in their artistic quality and how they're engaging with the community.
Yeah, I wasn't able to pull up that YouTube either.
Mm-hmm.
Me neither.
Several times.
Yeah.
Any other comments? If not, please update your scores.
Is it a little warm in here? Yes.
Fine.
I'm gonna open the door just so we'll share it.
Maybe a little stuffy.
Bring Eric back from exile. Possibly be that a pregnant person would be warm,
I'm
right?
not judge the temperature, I asked.
All right, we're going to go to our last application of the day. That is the Zionsville Center for Art History and Genealogy. And Sarah, you are the first reader.
I thought this was a really interesting application. This was my first time being introduced to this organization at all, so the combination of art history and genealogy was quite new to me. But I thought it was helpful for them to explain it in their history. They laid it out in a way that made sense, sort of how they have changed over the years as an organization. I thought their mission was fairly clear, and I appreciated that they stated their plans to diversify their board. Those efforts being made, I think, will help them in the long run. Strong-ish community engagement section. For me, one of the things I would have liked to see more is other strategies to seek out collaboration and input from underserved communities, beyond stating they have free or reduced admission for specific communities. More explanation on how they're meeting the needs and barriers beyond monetary, I think, would be nice to see. I said strategies to seek out collaboration and input from underserved communities should be increased or explained in better detail as the larger focus of their community engagement strategies, with monetary barriers being an additional tactic as opposed to a major portion of it. I liked their arts education section. I don't really have too many comments on that area. And similarly for their artistic quality section. Overall, I would like to see more efforts or explanation about engaging with more diverse and underserved communities.
Eric?
I agree. I was intrigued by just what this group does. I've never seen this combination of focal points come together like this. But I was fascinated by it. I had a slightly different take on community engagement. The diversity points are taken, but it seemed to me that this organization exists to preserve and promote the history of the community it lives in. The thing that really stood out to me, this Ghost Walk program fascinates me. It is implemented with, by, and for the community, shares local history, engaging the population in the activity. It builds civic pride, encourages collaboration and creativity among neighbors. It literally brings the art to the community, in some cases to your front door. And I was reading it and I was like, this is an episode of Gilmore Girls. It was incredible. I will actively seek out this activity next year to go participate in. I think it's great. Areas of accessibility that I thought were really strong: free access to the programming, collaboration with other community organizations. Again, the way that programming literally goes out into the community, and the free curriculum support for schools, I thought was great. Under artistic quality, it would have been nice to see the artistic documentation show more actual art, rather than just a brochure for what's in there. I would have loved to have seen maybe some video of the Ghost Walk or some other programming that they do. Just to strengthen that up and give a clearer picture of what the organization does would have helped, considering that some of us, kind of cock our heads as we're approaching the organization. But there are some intriguing things in this application.
Other comments?
I really did like the use of space program. I thought that was a nice way of assisting various community groups, that can meet, like I think they mentioned, like a poetry group and different organizations. So I thought that was a nice example of community engagement.
And I just had one comment on their organizational excellence. They've been in existence for 10 years, and they have 15 on the board of directors. And they make mention that they want to expand and improve the board. 10 years. Maybe they're thinking of going in a different direction, or maybe to weed out old board members, or maybe capping on the years. But I thought that was an interesting comment. After 10 years, you would think you would be a little tighter. My only comment, and I agree with everyone else.
Just on that, it was interesting to me. They say they're embracing the Commission's board development matrix, looking to improve their board makeup, but there's no real discussion of what the current board makeup is. Nothing about age range, diversity, or anything, and just having that as a barometer would have helped measure that desired improvement.
I share the feeling of all of the panel on being intrigued by this organization. I would have honestly liked to hear a little bit more about the genealogy and history component. I understand this is an arts application, but that's very unique and a part of their uniqueness, and I would have been interested. I wondered, I did have some questions in the arts education section. I wanted to know a little bit more about the format of classes, how long they are, how many students, I found some of that on their website, but I thought it could have been explained in the application itself. I did note that they say they're the only organization in the area that offers clay classes and open studio time. And there are other organizations that do those things, so but I may not be understanding their definitions of the area. Are they offering both independently of each other? So that brought up some questions. Do they assess or measure outcomes beyond specific skills? I would have liked to hear a little more about outcomes. And then in the artistic quality section, the artistic documentation looked to me more of a promotional piece rather than a descriptive quality piece. So I had a little bit of a hard time assessing the quality based on that piece.
Other comments? Go ahead and finalize your scores. Number 7, just
Yes.
So. This concludes the fiscal year 2020 Regional Initiative Grant Panel for today, and thank you. So we do want to keep you